Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, a walkthrough of the Global Trade Alert database with its coordinator, Professor Simon Evenett. My name is Dmitry Grozubinski, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. I am the Executive Director of the Geneva Trade Platform, which convenes Geneva Trade Week. I will hand over to Simon in just a moment, but I want to abuse my prerogative as host to gush about the database you're about to learn about. Many of you may be familiar with it already, but it, like a lot of great products, solves a problem. At the World Trade Organization, indeed in policy analysis, we are habitually playing catch up, often with a lag of years, in trying to understand what governments are doing in terms of their policy settings and how that affects trade. It's not unusual for notifications at the WTO to take many months, if not years, to arrive, and even longer to process. The Global Trade Alert database cuts through all of that and shortens that time lag down to something where you can react and get a picture of what is happening in trade today rather than 5 years ago. It's a formidable policy analysis tool, and one that I know Simon and his team are expanding every day and adding new features to and making more usable and practicable. If you are in the research space, if you're a student, if you're a policy activist or a government official, if you're in the private sector, there is almost certainly something in this database that can help you be more efficient and more effective in understanding the state of play that global trade happens in and spotting how to take advantage of it or where you need to place your attentions. So I am incredibly glad that I am able to bring you Professor Simon Evenett to talk about how the database works and then walk you through how to get the most out of it. So with no further ado than that, Professor, the floor is yours.
Dmitry, thank you very much for both the invitation and for that very kind introduction. I also want to thank the participants for joining us today for this overview of the Global Trade Alert. I'm going to raise some slides now, which will help me make the following argument and presentation to you. So I put some slides up and hopefully you can see them. If not, Dmitry, please shout. Now, my goal in this particular presentation is really to introduce the Global Trade Alert to you very quickly and then to go on and show you how to extract information about policy changes affecting global commerce. I will also mention some of the different use cases for the evidence and also point you to where you can learn more or extract more from the website. Our initiative began in 2009. We started collecting public policy information on changes to trade policy, commercial policy and the like from the 1st of November 2008. That starting date was chosen because that was the month that the G20 leaders said that they would refrain from protectionism at the start of the global financial crisis. And one of the purposes of the GTA at the beginning was to monitor that pledge. Over time, we've become an independent point of reference, which has been acknowledged by senior WTO officials as well as by the IMF and others as well. The Global Trade Alert is housed within the Singalan Endowment for Prosperity Through Trade, and we have a sister initiative called the Digital Policy Alert, which is younger, but we are nurturing it, and we hope to have an excellent activity monitor for governments taking steps in the digital economy. So this is an area that we're building up as well. Now, let me start off with describing what the statement of purpose of the initiative of the Global Trade Alert is, then go into the problem that needs to be solved, and then highlight how we indeed tackle that problem, the database that was created, and then I'll show you how to extract information from it. So that's very much the sequence that I would like to follow. Our statement of purpose is a little bit long. It's on 2 slides, but it starts off with a very important dictum, which is that what gets measured gets managed. And this is extremely important in the area of trade policy and trade policy negotiations. If there is a factual vacuum, it is possible for governments to avoid issues and to duck issues. So what we have done is we take the view that on net, more transparency is better. We want to see globalization better managed for all, and in order to do that, we're going to we will reconceive how government policy is measured and documented. We want to democratize access to that information so that it can be used by analysts, by governments to design better policies, and to ensure that international commerce becomes a stronger engine for human progress in the decades to come. So this is very much the normative starting point of our foundation. In terms of how we go about doing this, so turning from the goals to the sort of core competence of the organization, we combine trade policy expertise with novel ways to acquire, enrich, and analyze information on public policy changes. Our goal is to become a trusted, impartial source of information for many, and for the many who are interested in knowing what governments are really doing to global commerce, not what they say they are doing. We are based in St. Gallen, but we also want to emphasize that we're interested in engaging with individuals and organizations that respect our independence and share our core values as well. And that is all very much as, again, with the goal in mind of ensuring that the millennium-old human imperative to trade remains a force for good as we try and tackle the challenges of the 21st century. So this is very much what we seek to accomplish through our efforts and how we are going about it. Now, you might ask, well, what is the problem that we want to solve? The problem, you can break it down into two parts. The first is that although many governments publish information on what they are doing, often that information is remarkably hard for intelligent lay people to be able to interpret. And I have an example here from India. On the left-hand side is a customs notice of a tariff increase in India. And you can see how it's written up. It's probably formally, legally correct. But if you read this text, it's absolutely impenetrable for non-experts. And even for many trade policy experts, they might find this hard to understand. And so what we have done is to train up teams of people who can read these types of documents and translate them into something approaching common English, which we could all understand. And what we have on the right-hand side here is our report in our database, which corresponds to the notice on the left. And so we take complex, hard to understand, non-transparent government information, and we make it more transparent. So the first problem is bringing alive non-transparent information and making it easier to use and to access. The second problem we're here to tackle is one which Dimitri also alluded to, and that is that international organizations often collect information on public policy changes. Sometimes that information is supplied to it by governments, sometimes with a delay, sometimes incompletely. And as a result, those lists can be incomplete. And here we have an example of the COVID-19 trade measures affecting medical goods and food, which is collected by one Geneva-based organization. And you can see here there's 388 entries which they have found and documented. In fact, we have been able to document 1,173 of exactly the same types of policy interventions and covering the same goods. And so there's an incompleteness in a lot of official collection of information, which we seek to remedy as well. Furthermore, the information is often presented in a way which is not particularly easy to search or to recover. And we have deliberately designed our website to overcome that problem as well. So there are two fundamental problems which we have in trade policy information. Often it's to the extent that it's published, it can be extremely complex and hard to understand. And secondly, often it's incomplete. Now, the consequence of this is that there is an illusion that information or sufficient information has been shared, whereas in fact the reality is that we actually know a lot less about trade policy than many people would like, especially if we rely on official sources. So fundamentally, the problems that I've just shown you deny the public information to hold governments to account. The media often doesn't have the resources to carefully track government actions either, and as a result, our democracies suffer. I think we learned from the last US administration that some politicians are prepared to make all sorts of fake or false claims about foreign governments, and it's hard to counterattack those claims or counter those claims because of a lack of underlying reliable information. So the whole debate on trade policy, both nationally and internationally, is often skewed by a lack of information. And of course, such information is often hoarded by the powerful for the benefit of the few. And in my view, that discredits globalization and the opportunities that it creates for individuals. And this is problematic, since I see globalization as a force for good. So the Global Trade Alert was established to remedy these deficiencies. And I have this slide here precisely because this information deficit is not just a technocratic matter. It's a first order governance matter at the national and the global levels. And we need to take steps to counter it. Now, having showed you what problem we wish to solve here and why we wish to do it, let me tell you a bit more about the initiative and then how we collect information. As I indicated earlier, this initiative was created in 2009 at the beginning of the global financial crisis, precisely because people were concerned about the transparency of government policy as it relates to trade and investment. We are housed at the University of St. Gallen. We have always been dedicated to remaining independent. We are committed to treating all of the governments that we monitor in an even-handed manner. In that sense, we are a Swiss-based organization, and that coming with that comes a lot of expectations about neutrality, which we adhere to. To make the Global Trade Alert permanent, we moved it into a foundation in November 2021. The foundation was set up by the Max Schmidt-Heine Foundation of the University of St. Gallen, the university itself, and myself. Although we are located in St. Gallen in Switzerland, that is our home, we have an international network of team members who are capable of reading dozens of languages. And what we've done is to take that team of trade policy experts who can read many languages and combine it with coders who help us acquire, process, and information as well. And it's this combination of both trade policy expertise and coding, which I think stands us apart from other initiatives in this area. So this gives you a sense of who we are. How do we collect information? And now we get more into the nuts and bolts. It would be good to think about this in 5 steps. The first step is to think about sourcing information of policy changes which are in scope. Let me tell you a bit about the policies that we seek to document. We are interested principally in unilateral policy interventions by governments. In our view, the sort of multilateral agreements are publicly available, the tariff obligations and bindings are publicly available, regional trading agreements are often on the web. The big data gap is actually at the unilateral level. Now, amongst the unilateral policy interventions, we cover the waterfront except for TBT and SPS. When we set up our initiative, we decided not to do TBT and SPS precisely because the WTO has the EPING service, which is quite highly regarded. And so our data collection then focuses on other policy interventions. These include border policy interventions like tariffs and quota changes. They also include contingent trade policy changes, trade remedy acts. We also have inside the border changes, subsidy actions, government procurement actions, investment policy actions as well. I should emphasize we are interested in all forms of cross-border commerce. So we're interested in documenting policy changes that affect goods trade, services trade, foreign direct investment flows, data flows, flows of people, flows of intellectual property. And so we have all of these different types of trade that we wish to document public policies towards. And of course, we're particularly interested in public policies which change the relative treatment of domestic firms or suppliers compared to their foreign rivals. So policy changes which are non-discriminatory are ones which are less of interest to us. What's more of interest is when the degree of discrimination changes, and it can change in ways which advance foreign commercial interests relative to domestic interests, as well as the opposite. So we are therefore interested in documenting liberalizing policy interventions as well as ones which are harmful for foreign commercial interests. We source information through a number of ways. First, we consistently track several hundred government websites where announcements are made of policy interventions, and we do that in both using both human intervention as well as in an automated fashion. We also check the submissions to the WTO and other international organizations which are relevant. We also look in some cases at news sources to see if there are indications of a policy change. And here I want to stress an important distinction. At this first stage here, we identify what we call leads, possible policy interventions. Those leads are then investigated by humans, and if there is information that can be documented using official sources, we will then write up a submission to the database. And this takes us to the second stage in this chart. We then document and tag information on a public policy intervention. We have a taxonomy of 61 types of public policy intervention. And to give you a sense of how strongly committed we are to documenting public policy interventions using official sources, in our database now, which has nearly 40,000 public policy interventions, 97.6% of them are documented using official sources. So this gives you a sense of how strongly committed we are to using official information. This is important. There's a sort of deeper point here which I would like to make, which is that although governments may be a little bit slow or hesitant to notify the WTO of their actions, often they're much more transparent to their domestic policy audiences or domestic audiences. And what we are doing here, of course, is taking advantage of this transparency revolution in governance at the national level, and then translating that into improvements in transparency at the global level. And this is very much what we want to do. In fact, you might think, and I think there's an interesting question to be had, what role is needed, or whether notifications to the WTO are going to be needed if more governments commit to transparency at the national level. There may well be ways of translating that national commitment into useful information at the multilateral level. Again, it has to be done right, but fundamentally, the thing that makes the data collection possible for the Global Trade Alert is that governments are often much more transparent at the national level. And I should point out that although many countries like to think of themselves as more transparent than others, there are a lot of countries out there who are not often credited with being transparent, who are perhaps more transparent than other governments give them credit for. And we, of course, use that. So at the second stage then, a human, one of our trade policy analysts, will put together a submission on a public policy intervention, documenting it and tagging it along a number of dimensions. And I'll have a subsequent slide which shows you the tagging. Once that report has been prepared, it is then submitted for first round review, and we have seven tests which we look for in a measure before we are prepared to publish it. And that's those 7 steps I'm prepared to go into Q&A, but you can find them all in our GTA handbook. If the first round review is passed, then the measures goes to the second round review with a different team member. These reviews are done by very senior team members. I'm heavily involved in the second round review process. And then if the second round review is satisfied, the measure is published. In the first round review and second round review, a submission can be rejected outright, or a measure can be sent back for revisions if they're incomplete, or if we think there is an error, or if a policy intervention has been poorly described. Once a measure has been approved at both levels of review, it's published, and then we move into the 5th stage on this chart, on this diagram. After a measure has been published, that's not the end of the story. There can be updates to the measure, as well as, and we conduct checks on the whole database before we publish every single GTA report. So we're currently preparing our 28th report, and a whole series of checks are being done on the entire database to make sure that there are no obvious mistakes. So I'll give you a cute example. When we first started working on the Global Trade Alert, sometimes we found that our team members were entering in career as a as the implementing jurisdiction, and unfortunately they were occasionally choosing North Korea as the implementing jurisdiction when in fact it was South Korea. So we have a number of checks which ensure that common mistakes are not repeated and don't happen. And these are built into our processes. So what you can see here is a very elaborate process of sourcing information, documenting it, reviewing it, checking it, all the way through. And this is done to ensure quality control. And this is very much the way in which information is gathered in the GTA. Now, you might ask, what are those tags? What are the information that we tag for each public policy intervention? These tags are important because these are very much the criteria by which you can search our database. So as we move from describing the database into using the database, it's important to know what we can search by. And I've listed here the most important tags that we have. We tag for the customs territory, which is implementing the measure, the level of government responsible, so that could be subnational, national, or supranational, the type of public policy intervention. Again, we have 61 different types of public policy intervention in our taxonomy, which firms are eligible, whether it's a horizontal measure, whether there are certain types of firms which are eligible, the dates a policy intervention is announced, comes into force and lapses, where a measure affecting trading goods is being considered, we will identify the HS codes, and we will also identify using the United Nations CPC classification, the sectoral codes, and we will assess whether or not the treatment of domestic firms is altered relative to that of foreign firms. So this is the relative treatment test, which is at the center of our classification of measures. So measures which are said to improve the relative treatment of domestic firms at the expense of foreign firms are ones we give a color coding of red or amber. Measures which improve the treatment of foreign firms at the expense of domestic firms are liberalizing ones, which we code green. And so this is where we examine. This is how we classify measures. Now, using the underlying trade flow data, flows in FDI or flows in migration, where also it's also possible to identify who the affected trading partners are. Let me give you an example to highlight this, because this is actually one of the important features of our work. Suppose Switzerland were to raise the tariff on butter on an MFN basis. Then what we would do is, suppose the tariff increase happened this year in 2021, we would use trade data for 2020 or the latest year available to identify which foreign countries, which trading partners of Switzerland, exported $1 million or more of butter to Switzerland, and these would become the affected trading partners. And so we have developed protocols for identifying the affecting trading partners in an automated fashion for trade in goods measures, trade in investment measures, trade in services measures, and migration measures as well. And all of that is automated. It turns out it's very important to automate it because different trade policy analysts may not follow the same procedure when identifying affected trading partners, and this is clearly a form of inconsistency we want to avoid. As a general rule, whenever we can, we try to automate the processes that we use. So at least when it comes to things like identifying affected trading partners and the like, so that the measures are consistently tagged across the thousands and thousands of entries in our database. So these are the tags that we use in our database, and these are essentially the items that you can search by. Okay, I'll turn next then to the uses of our data before showing you the database or the website. There are three common uses of our database. There are other uses as well, but we find users searching our database for information on what their government has been doing or what foreign governments have been doing to their country's commercial interests. And we got a lot of inquiries from governments but even more from journalists asking for information on this. We also see people extracting information from our database and using them in presentations, and I'll show you how to extract information very soon. And we also conduct analysis and of our data and make policy recommendations. Others do too. I note that there's over 2,600 entries in the Google Scholar database that mention the global trade alert. So this is used in analysis as well. We've also heard of governments using this information to be able to identify potential negotiating priorities and areas where there are possible export opportunities or loss of export opportunities in the case of harmful or protectionist measures. So these are lots of different uses for our data. Perhaps in Q&A we can talk about more of them if you have great ideas in this respect. I think I will stop here on this part of the presentation and turn to the website, and then I will show you how to extract the information from that website. I should say I will complete the presentation and then gladly take questions. I've been encouraged to encourage you to put the questions in the chat, please. In the Q&A. Some people put them in the chat. That's okay. We'll get to them, and it's my goal to try and answer those questions as soon as we can. So let me show you our website and how to extract information from it. If I've done this right, you should see our website now. The URL is being highlighted by my cursor here, globaltradealert.org. This is the opening page of our website, and I will take you through the different pages on the site which are useful. So let me begin by turning to the Global Dynamics page, which summarizes the overall policy dynamics that we observe. And this may take a second or two to come up on your screen. The website sometimes takes some time to load, mainly because we have so many public policy interventions. And you can see here in this top panel, we have on the left the number of policy interventions which have been documented for each year, and you can see the growing number in blue over time, with a spike for 2020 reflecting the pandemic. And you can see that the number of policy interventions that harm foreign commercial interests are much, much higher than the number liberalizing, unfortunately. Now, you might also notice here that in 2021, the totals are much lower than for the other years. That's not because this is a fantastic year, it's just that we've had only 9 months to collect information on 2021, and we've had for 2020, 21 months. For 2019, we've had 33 months. And so in order to correct for the reporting lag, the length of time for reporting, it's possible to use a function that we have over on the right-hand side here called reporting lag. And then if you click on adjusted here, as I have just done, and you choose the date that you want to have the reporting lag for, so I'll choose today, what this will do when I hit apply is will tell us what were the totals each year which had been reported by the 29th of September of that year. So we will be able to compare the totals for reported by 2021 against 2020, against 2019, on the basis of the same reporting length. And this is the information which will now come up, I hope, over time. This may take a few seconds or two as this does this. And this will show us the annual totals that have been reported each year. And you can see you get a very, very, very different story. What you can see here is that once you correct for the length of time, once you impose the same length of time in terms of reporting, then you can see that the amount of public policy intervention in 2020 and 2021 stands out compared to previous years, and that these last 2 years have seen a very large number of harmful policy interventions documented. 2020 is unique for standing out, but as it has, you can see that there's just under 500 liberalizing policy interventions, which of course were all the tariff cuts on medical goods that we saw last year. And so in this manner, then you can correct for different lengths of reporting or reporting lags, and you can get a much clearer apples for apples comparison of the flow of new interventions over time. And of course, you can choose the cutoff date as you like. You will find that if you choose cutoff dates in the second half of the year, the results tend to be much more consistent and stable over time. Another feature is that you can use on the global dynamics page is to choose. You can choose which trade flow you wish to consider. So what I have, the statistics here are for all forms of trade. Suppose you're interested in goods trade, then you could click on goods trade and then hit apply, and the results would be recalculated for goods trade only. Likewise, you could click on investment if you're interested in investment policy measures, migration policy measures, and service sector measures. And you'll see that the results will come up once all the goods trade measures have been extracted. And again, the finding that we saw earlier applies. You can also, if you wish, decide to focus on public policy interventions that affect imports, that affect exports, and on the export side, you can look at public policy interventions which are export incentives or export restrictions. And so the flows affected option here, if you click on this flows affected option, you can find measures, and here I focus on import related measures and extract the statistics for import related measures as well. And again, the statistics will be recomputed, in this case for the reporting lag adjusted totals for goods trade and only for import related measures. And you can see, interestingly, this year has seen a spike in the number of policy interventions which are reducing imports. These are principally subsidies to import competing firms this year. Now, you'll notice that there are these different export buttons all over the website. And if you see a chart that you like, you can click on this export button and it will enable you to extract an Excel file with the underlying data. So if your desire is to reproduce this data, or perhaps you can produce a chart which is slightly nicer than ours, or better or differently, then you can extract the underlying data for any chart by just hitting the relevant export button, which is there. And you can see here there are export buttons all over these pages deliberately to enable you to extract information from each different chart that is produced. So on global dynamics, that's all I would like to say. The next area I want to show you is how to extract information on various countries. And what we have is a list here, actually, not of countries, but of customs territories, which is why you can see the Falkland Islands is there, which is not a country, it is a customs territory, and so it's included in our database. Let's take a country such as Argentina. If we click on Argentina, then the information on Argentina will come up. Let me show you how to interpret this information. This chart shows you all the measures which are implemented by Argentina, which affect every other country in the world. So we haven't filtered by affected trading partners. So this is a summary of all of Argentina's measures affecting any foreign trading partner. And again, you can get annual totals, and again, you can do reporting lag adjusted changes if you wish. So again, everything we did on the global dynamics page, we can do on the countries page as well. Now, the other interesting thing about this particular page is that suppose you're interested not in what measures Argentina has done which affects the rest of the world, suppose you're interested in what the rest of the world has done which affects Argentina. Then you click the two arrows button as I have just done, and it will recompute the charts for all the measures affecting Argentina. And this will then enable you to extract information on the annual totals in this regard. And you'll also find as you scroll down this page, there's further information on the sectoral breakdown, the types of public policy interventions, and specific policy interventions as well. So you can then look at a country's trade stance against other countries, and you can look at a country as a potentially affected by other countries' policy interventions. And so this is for aggregate national policy stance. The other use of this particular page is to look at bilateral comparisons if you want to do it. So suppose one is interested in Brazil's policy interventions that affect Argentina. So instead of having all countries be the implementing country, we instead just type in for Brazil, and then we recompute the statistics for Brazil. And you can see here, this will produce the statistics on the number of liberalizing and harmful interventions that Brazil has implemented that affect Argentina. And this then will help with bilateral comparisons. It's quite possible that you may be interested in not just Brazil, but there might be other countries in the neighborhood that you're interested in as well. So you could take Uruguay, and you can also add Uruguay in as well. And so it's possible to have comparisons between multiple countries as both implementers and affected jurisdictions. And so in this way, bilateral and multilateral comparisons are possible on the countries page as well. This type of information, I think, could be particularly useful for officials who are interested in knowing what another country's commercial policies are doing to its commercial interests. The journalists might be interested in this type of comparison as well. And of course, there are many analysts who are interested in bilateral trade flows as well. Now, what I've shown you for countries can be done for sectors as well. And here you can identify the sectors or the 4-digit product codes which you want to track. And you can do exactly what I've just described earlier. So if we type in iron and steel, we could choose products of iron and steel, and this will reproduce the statistics for iron and steel. You can then combine products of iron and steel with basic products, basic iron and steel, and so you can have multiple sectors where you can extract data. And if you want, you can drill down at the 4-digit level in the HS codes to identify specific iron and steel products that you are interested in. So you can dig even further if you want to, and the data will come up. I should be clear here that in the tagging that the Global Trade Alert team does, we tag HS codes down to the 6-digit level. The website allows you to extract information on trade flows, on policy interventions at the 4-digit level is the most granular. If you have 6-digit level HS code data extraction needs, then please write to us. I'll quickly wrap up on the website. The latest state acts that we've published are available on the latest state acts site here, which I've just tried to click and it may come up. And then there are also reports which are available as well. And it seems to be that the internet connection here is a little bit slow, and so this is not necessarily coming up as quickly. But everything we have just done with the country page and the sectors and products page, you can do on the latest state acts page. Our analysis is available on the reports page. And the last page, which is of interest, is the data and methods page for 2 reasons. First, you can extract the entire data set from that page. And secondly, you can download the GTA handbook from the data and methods page. And this handbook describes our methodology in detail. So the latest state acts page has come up just now. I'll just quickly click on the data methodology page. You can see here you can download the full data set in an Excel file. You can also download our methodology as well. And the complete GTA handbook describes everything, all the steps that we take and how we process information. And this is the Bible for the GTA team, and it's the standard point of reference for us. Now, the last thing I need to do is just to wrap up my presentation, and then I will turn to Q&A. So let me quickly do that, and I will then try and answer your questions. So, if you want to learn more, please go to our website. I've put in here the link so you can extract the GTA handbook so you can understand our methodology. You can extract the full data set as I indicated earlier. I've told you where you can get our GTA reports. We do specially tailored information collection projects, and one of them we've been doing since the pandemic has begun is on essential goods. This is monitoring trade policy changes affecting medicines, vaccines, and food and agri-food. And we have a monthly update which you can download. Our next monthly update for that will be available on Friday. So if you want to look on Friday at this particular URL, the one which has /54, you will be able to download our latest briefing on developments in these critical goods. I should add, by the way, if you're interested in tracking that information more systematically, you can always email us and we'll put you on the distribution list. If you have special data requests, you know how to contact us at this email address at the bottom here. Last thing, a request to you. We are very interested in trying to serve the global community better. And so for that reason, we are very keen to learn what your commercial policy related data needs are. We recognize that not everybody likes to receive data in the same way. That's been an important lesson for us. And so we're interested in your feedback on how to download or access this data. Some people prefer to read. Some people like dedicated dashboards. Some people might want specialized websites. There's also a question of how to engage. Some people like using our website, but one thing which we're considering doing in the future is holding briefings or virtual briefings on different topics. And if you want to join those or you have topics for those, then please let us know. So we are interested very much in the feedback that we can get to improve the quality of what we hope is a global public good. We are particularly interested when engaging with small and medium-sized enterprises who I think are at an informational disadvantage compared to big firms, and to officials and analysts in developing countries in the LDC. So anyone from these groups as well, we're very keen to hear from. We're keen to learn from everyone, but we really do want to help engage with, or we want to engage with the SMEs and the developing countries and LDC colleagues to help level the informational playing field. So that's all I want to say in terms of the presentation. I'm going to turn now to the chat and to the Q&A and try and answer the questions which have been put to me. And so let's go into the Q&A. I'll start on the Q&A. We have Cham has asked if the presentation can be shared, and I think I will be happy to make that available to Dimitri and his team. Okay, and he can share this. Then we have a question from an anonymous attendee. What is the unit of account? Okay, the unit of analysis in the Global Trade Alert is, or rather the unit of it that we count is a public policy intervention. So it could be that you have a single decree which raises the tariffs on one product. So that's a public policy announcement with one policy intervention, and this would count then as one. Sometimes you get budgets for countries which have 20 different policy interventions. And so we differentiate between state acts, which is the announced state act, and policy interventions. And a state act can have multiple policy interventions. And we have set up our database so it can be searched either by state act or by public policy intervention. Okay. We have also set up, of course, as you've seen, our database so that you can search by HS codes. But in terms of the counts that we report, those annual totals that you saw, these are of public policy interventions. We were asked by Floriana, do we compute indices? We have not got in the business of computing indices based on our database, but we are keen that others do so, and we'd be happy to talk about index construction with colleagues so that if there are any features of our data which should be taken into account when an index is constructed, let's talk about that. Rostant has asked, how can we extract the data? Hopefully I've answered that question in my presentation, either using the extract buttons or the data extract, or going to the data extraction page. So hopefully that has answered all the questions in the Q&A. I will now turn to the questions in the chat to see if I can answer those. Right, so we have a question from Sergio about the digital policy alert. Now, as I said to you earlier, the digital policy alert is our sister initiative, and as you saw on our webpage, it is a separate page is dedicated to that. The structure of that database is slightly different because it deals with lots of different regulations. The policy taxonomy is different, and it is our intention as that database builds to make it as queryable and searchable as the GTA as well. And so that information is available there. You can, of course, go into that database and look along and search along a number of dimensions already, but we want to build out that particular functionality. The digital policy alert relates to a set number of policy intervention types. These relate to different areas of regulation that bear upon the digital economy. And if you look on that page, you'll see the taxonomy of policies involved. And we've broken down actually the taxonomy into two dimensions. One, policy types or regulatory policy type or regulatory law type. And the second is on the type of commercial entities affected. So you can search the database along regulatory policy dimensions or upon the business units being affected. Okay? Hopefully that answers Sergio's question. Now, Luz has asked, can you see the actual policy? Now, this is I'm not sure I entirely understand that question, but let me try and answer it in the following way. Every intervention which is on that on the website in terms of implemented measures, the totals you have there are for implemented measures, and they show you the flow of new implemented measures per year. It is possible to search our database for measures which are currently in force. So one of the search criteria that we have on those on the pages which you can search on, so on the latest state acts page, for example, one of the criteria is currently in force. So you can restrict the data extraction and the statistics extraction to measures which are in force today. And this then I think helps you sort out policies which have, or weed out policies which have been, which have lapsed. Okay.
Simon, I think perhaps that question might have been about when you're looking at a policy intervention, whether on GTA you've got both your summary and the statistics on it, but then as you showed us with the Indian import tax policy, the actual government document.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Dimitri. I think it's very helpful. And the answer is yes. So we have a policy, we have a summary of the policy intervention, as I showed you in the Indian example. That was the text on the right of that slide. And then there is a source section where you can click through and recover the underlying state act. Yep. And that information is there. So I think if that's what Luz meant, the answer is most definitely yes. We're very much, we recognize that many people are interested in not just our summary, but actually seeing the underlying legal documentation, which is what we happily provide. Okay, so thank you for that, Dimitri. I think very helpful. Now, Sergio also asked a question about what's the benefits for SMEs. And so here I think there are a number. First is you can use our database, since our database indicates when policies are going to lapse or come into force, it's possible to use our database to identify which liberalizing measures which have been implemented in the past are going to be phased out in the next, say, 6 months or 12 months. So think in the current context, imagine you're an exporter of syringes and an importing country has temporarily suspended or eliminated import duties on syringes. And if that suspension ends in 3 months' time, then you can find out in this using this database when the tariff suspension will end. And this, of course, has clear implications for when you need to get your goods across the border. So that's one possible use of this information. Another possible use of this information is that there may have been tariff reforms or trade policy reforms in the past 6 or 12 months that a small or medium-sized enterprise was not aware of. So you can gather that information. And of course, you can go in and use our database to search for a particular product code in a particular destination market. So you can extract all of the policy interventions which relate to reforms in the last 6 to 12 months. Likewise, you could look either backwards or forwards at discriminatory policy interventions. So you could look backwards and see over the last 6 months, what steps have been taken that have worsened the conditions of competition for foreign firms, and what steps, if you look forward in time, are potentially going to be implemented. So that's another way in which this can be used, essentially to monitor changes in market access. And of course, this could be set up in ways which automatically generate that information whenever we detect a change in market access conditions. So it is possible, for a human to go onto our website and do this, but it would also be possible to automate that and deliver the information via an email or some other means. So I think there's actually lots of ways in which we can make this even more useful for SMEs. And I'm very keen on talking to anyone who wants to go down that road. Now, let me see if there are any other questions which have been put to me. I think there are not. So I will wait. One more has appeared, I think. We have a question. Is the digital policy alert built to be used together with the GTA? The answer to that question is yes and no. No in the sense that they are distinct databases. Yes in the sense that wherever possible, we have tried to use the same methodology in both cases. But please remember the digital policy alert refers often to a number of regulatory policies which are not in the global trade alert. And so the methodology is not identically the same, but they are recognizable sisters. There's another sense in which they are not they cannot be used together, in the sense that you cannot put in one search or one inquiry and extract information from both databases. At the moment, that's not possible. That may well change as we go forward. So we have a question. Can we set up alerts for specific types of measures that we track, for example? In the digital policy alert, I believe you can, yes. And in fact, actually, we send out weekly alerts to people, and they can be tailored. So if you go onto our website, Yan, you can sign up for alerts on the digital policy alert, and you'll get them every Monday if you ask for them weekly. I know they happen to go out Monday evenings, continental European time. If you have any difficulties in this respect, Yan, please contact me.
Can I ask a question about the GTA alerts, Simon?
Yes, please.
Just to confirm my understanding. So you did quite an elaborate sort of search, quite filtered search before, where you had a country pair, and then I think also by sector, or by measure type. So using the website, can I set up, for example, if I'm a steel exporter from Canada to the US, can I set up an alert where GTA will email me every time there is a new US import-related measure on steel? What's the level of alerts specificity I can get?
Okay, so the alerts at the moment principally are for the digital policy alert. We used to have alerts for the GTA, and I think we will need to sort of we're more than happy to reinstitute those. But again, this is where user feedback would be very helpful, because if that's the level of tailored alert that people want, then that type of thing can be set up. It's nothing impossible with it in terms of technical feasibility. It's just a matter of getting it done. But that in principle is doable as well.
Fantastic. Sorry for breaking your flow.
Not at all. I think we've covered all the questions in the Q&A in the chat. We've got 5 minutes left, which is great. We may even end early. I really want to thank everyone who came and and listened. And if you have feedback and wish to get in touch with me, then please do write. You can write to me at simon.evenett@sgept.org. And maybe I'll write that in the chat myself so that everyone else isn't doing that.
Oops.
That's my university one, and that's fine too. Okay.
Sorry, trying to help.
You are. It's fine. I check both emails, so don't worry. We have an account for the endowment as well as my university account. Either one is fine. Anyone who wants to follow up on these matters, whether it's about data extraction, ideas for how we can improve our data collection, or different use cases, then please do follow up with us. We're very keen to take this global public good further.
And from our side, what we will do is we will send those of you who registered for this this session on Zoom. We will send you all a copy of Simon's presentation if he's happy to share it, as well as a link to the YouTube video where you can watch this back, sort of watch him slowly do things, and share it with your colleagues.
Thank you, Dimitri, and to your team as well for making this possible and making and enabling us to reach a wider audience. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. In that case, there's nothing more for me to do except to thank Simon for doing this for us during Geneva Trade Week. Thank all of you for joining us and for asking such great questions. And then to ask my team to roll the outro credits as we wave goodbye.